A father fell from mountaintop during family mountain trip. 8 months later, hiker uncovers a shocking truth of who pushed him. What happens next is shocking. They were supposed to be the picture-perfect family, smiling in vacation photos, hiking trails together, soaking in nature's peace. But peace turned to panic when a father plunged to his death from the edge of a quiet mountain. His wife's screams echoed across the cliffs. It was called a tragic accident. But 8 months later, a hiker made a chilling discovery that would blow open the case and reveal a hidden truth buried in silence and shadows. What he found led to one question: if the wife pushed him, and why she pushed him, why? The wind whipped hard against their faces as they climbed higher up the Blue Haven Ridge. The trail was narrow, rocky, and slick from the morning dew, but the view was breathtaking. From the peak, you could see for miles, the valley below wrapped in a gentle fog, the river slicing through the trees like a silver snake. It was the kind of place you'd want to remember forever. "I still don't see why we couldn't just do a beach trip," 15-year-old Ella muttered, wiping sweat off her forehead. Her dad, Daniel Morton, laughed from ahead. "Because sand gets in places you don't want it?" "Gross," she rolled her eyes, but a smile tugged at her lips. Behind them, Marie, Daniel's wife of 17 years, followed with a quiet, unreadable look on her face. She carried the backpack with snacks, water, and the small first aid kit. Her pace was steady, but her gaze kept shifting to her husband. They were a family that looked normal. But that morning, something had shifted. The silence between Daniel and Marie wasn't the usual tired kind. It was cold, distant. Ella had noticed, but didn't want to stir the air. It was just after 11 a.m. when they reached the overlook. It was a popular rest stop for hikers with a wooden guardrail, old and weathered, meant to stop people from getting too close to the edge. Beyond the rail, it was a straight drop, hundreds of feet down. Daniel walked toward the edge, pulled out his phone, and aimed it toward the valley. "Come take a photo, Ella." "I'm good here," she called back. Marie stood a few steps behind him, watching. Then it happened. A scream ripped through the air. Ella turned just in time to see her father slip. "Dad!" The phone flew from his hands. Marie lunged toward the railing, but it was too late. Daniel was gone. Ella sprinted toward the edge, but Marie grabbed her. "No, stay back. What happened?" He slipped. I don't know, he lost his balance, he just..." Marie's voice broke, and she collapsed to her knees, sobbing. It took search and rescue teams hours to find Daniel's body. He was dead on impact, his skull split open against the rocks below. They ruled it an accident, a tragic misstep, the kind that happens too often on mountain trails. But back in their hometown of Crestmont, not everyone believed it. Daniel had been an ex-Marine, trained, fit, careful, not the kind of man to just slip on a dry trail. And rumors had already been brewing: money problems, arguments behind closed doors, Marie's long, unexplained late-night drives. Still, no charges were filed, the case was closed. Life moved on, at least it was supposed to. 8 months passed. Then, in the spring, something happened. A man named Calvin Reese, a quiet, solitary hiker in his early 40s, was trekking through a rarely used path near Blue Haven Ridge. He'd been looking for old mining relics in a part of the mountain long forgotten. Overgrown trees, animal tracks, and faint remnants of old campsites filled the woods. But something else caught his eye. A trail of red plastic, faded and torn. He followed it. At the end of it, hidden under rocks and branches, was a GoPro. Cracked, half buried. He picked it up, brushed off the dirt. Back at his cabin, he charged it with an old cable. The screen flickered to life. The last video was dated 8 months ago. His hands trembled as he hit play. The screen showed Daniel, laughing, talking into the camera. Then it turned. Footsteps, breathing. Marie appeared in the frame. The video caught a split-second moment. A push. Daniel's shocked gasp, then the camera fell. The video cut off as it tumbled. Calvin's breath caught. This wasn't just a fall. Someone pushed him. His wife pushed him. He stood in silence, holding the camera in his hand, realizing what he had. And the real horror hadn't even begun, because what happened next would put his own life in danger. Before we continue, let us know in the comments where you are watching from today and what time you are currently watching this video. If you enjoy stories like this, make sure to like, share, and subscribe for more. The GoPro sat on the table like a loaded weapon. Calvin Reese didn't move for a long time. The only sound in his cabin was the faint ticking of the old wall clock and the low hum of the heater. He stared at the paused video on the screen, Daniel Morton's final moments, the shock on his face, the blur of the camera tumbling, the silence that followed. Calvin had hiked these mountains for years. He lived alone, kept to himself, and didn't bother with people unless they bothered him first. But this was something else. This wasn't a deer caught in barbed wire or a hiker with a sprained ankle. This was murder. He leaned forward, rewound the video again, played it frame by frame. He slowed it down, paused it at the moment Daniel turned his back. Then it happened, clear as day. Marie Morton's hand on his back, her face frozen in a twisted expression somewhere between cold and blank. A shove, not a slip, not an accident. A shove. Calvin stood up, pacing the floor. He didn't know the Mortons personally. Just knew the name from the news. Man falls off Blue Haven Ridge during family hike. The story had been everywhere for a week or two. Local outlets, maybe even national ones. And now here he was, holding the truth in his hands. He picked up his phone, dialed 911, then stopped. He stared at the screen. Something wasn't sitting right. His gut churned. If Marie pushed him off a cliff and faked the whole thing, then she was capable of more. What if she found out someone had the video? What if she came after him? He walked to the window, peeking through the curtain. The forest outside was still. But something about the silence didn't feel peaceful anymore. It felt watched. He powered down the GoPro and stuffed it in a locked drawer, just until he figured out what to do. The next morning, Calvin drove down to Crestmont. He had one plan, hand the GoPro to the police and walk away. But the moment he stepped inside the town, everything changed. First, the sheriff's office was closed due to a staff training day. Second, when he stopped at a local diner to eat, he overheard two older women chatting over coffee. You know that woman, the one whose husband fell off the mountain? Marie Morton? Yeah, that's the one. She's running for city council now. Can you believe that? Guess the sympathy vote works. Poor woman, lost her husband and all. Calvin froze mid-bite. She was running for office. If the camera got out, if this got messy, it wouldn't just be local news. It would explode. He'd seen what politics did to people, and what people in politics did to cover their tracks. He walked out of the diner without finishing his food. Back at the parking lot, he unlocked his truck, but felt something was off. His glove box was open. He always kept it closed. He opened the driver door slowly. Inside, his dashboard had been rummaged through. Nothing was missing, but someone had clearly been there. He scanned the parking lot. A black SUV was parked across the street, windows tinted, engine still running. A man in a gray coat leaned against it, pretending to check his phone. Calvin turned, got in his truck, and drove off. That night back in the cabin, he loaded his shotgun. He hadn't used it in years, just kept it for bears or mountain cats. But something told him the real danger now came on two legs. He didn't sleep that night. He stayed by the window, watching the tree line, listening for footsteps that never came. 2 days later, he drove out to see Daniel Morton's brother. He found the address in a public obituary. The man, Gregory Morton, was in his early 50s, bald, and had the look of someone who hadn't smiled in months. Calvin explained everything, slowly, carefully, then showed him the video. Gregory sat in silence, his eyes fixed on the screen. When it ended, he didn't say a word. He stood up and walked to the kitchen, came back with a bottle of bourbon and 2 glasses. I knew it, he muttered, pouring heavy. I knew she had something to do with it. You told the police? They didn't want to hear it, called it grief, said I was being paranoid, that maybe I was angry because of money stuff. I dropped it. I didn't have proof. Until now, Calvin hesitated. I want to go to the cops, but something's wrong. My truck was searched. I think someone's watching me. Gregory's hands curled around the glass. Then we do this smart, we get a copy made. Store it somewhere safe. And we don't go to the police, not yet. What do you mean? We make her sweat first. Calvin narrowed his eyes. You want revenge? Gregory looked up. I want justice. And I don't trust the system to give it. Not when she's smiling on campaign posters. Calvin didn't like the sound of it. But part of him understood. Marie was walking free. Charming crowds, hiding the truth. She was going to get away with it. Unless someone stopped her. That night, Calvin's cabin was broken into. He came back from a supply run and saw the front door half open. He drew his shotgun and crept inside. The living room was trashed. Drawers pulled out, furniture tipped over. They were looking for the camera. But they didn't find it, because Calvin had taken it with him. Then he heard something behind him. The back door creaked open. A man stepped inside, mid-40s, buzz-cut, black jacket. Gun drawn, Calvin fired first. The blast echoed through the woods. The man dropped instantly, groaning, bleeding from the shoulder. Calvin ran into the trees, through the brush. He didn't stop until he reached Gregory's place. By the time they called the police, the man was gone. But blood led to the woods. This wasn't random anymore. Someone had been sent to get that camera back, and they were willing to kill for it. Calvin barely slept, not after the break-in, not after the gunfire. The blood on his cabin floor was still fresh in his mind, even though the man had escaped. He hadn't killed him, just hit the shoulder, but that was enough to send a message. Calvin wasn't going to be taken out quietly. He now knew what he was up against. Whoever Marie Morton had in her corner wasn't just trying to protect her reputation. They were covering up a murder, and they were prepared to use force. It was early morning when he knocked on Gregory's door again. This time there was no small talk. "We need to flip this around," Calvin said. "Trap them before they come back for me again." Gregory nodded, pacing. "You said the guy who broke into your place wasn't alone?" "No way, someone was waiting outside. There was a black SUV parked near my trail. I think they were coordinating." "You think Marie's behind it?" Calvin gave him a hard look. "I know she is." Gregory sat down and tapped his fingers on the table. "I have an idea, but it's risky." Later that day, Calvin and Gregory drove into Crestmont in separate vehicles. They stayed off the main roads, avoided cameras, no phones. Gregory carried the GoPro in a brown box inside an old backpack. They weren't going to the police, not yet. Instead, they were going to someone who hated Marie almost as much as they did, Marissa Clay, a local reporter who once tried to dig into Marie's campaign finances. She'd been shut down hard, threats, warnings, even a cease and desist letter. But Marissa didn't scare easy. Her office was a dusty back room in a strip mall, behind a nail salon and next to a failing bookstore. The lights inside were dim, but her eyes lit up when she saw what they brought. "This real?" she asked, watching the video. Gregory nodded once, unedited. "Raw, found by a hiker 8 months after the fall." Marissa leaned back. "This could blow everything wide open. She'll never survive this going public." "She's trying to run for office," Gregory said. "We want to time this right." Marissa looked between them. "So what do you need me to do?" "Set the trap," Calvin said. That night, Marissa published a vague article. Breaking, major development in Blue Haven Ridge case. Source provides shocking video evidence. Full story coming soon. She didn't mention names. Didn't post the video, just enough to rattle the right cage. Calvin didn't go home. He stayed in a motel on the edge of town under a fake name. Gregory crashed at a friend's hunting lodge outside Crestmont. Marissa kept a burner phone on hand and had her assistant sleep at the office, just in case. They waited. And just before midnight, something happened. Marissa's assistant, Jen, heard a click near the back door, then a faint knock, then silence. She called Marissa immediately, whispering, "Someone's at the door." "I heard footsteps, but no one rang the bell." "Don't open it. Stay away from the windows." Jen nodded and ducked down. 5 minutes passed. 10, no sound, then crack, the front glass shattered. 2 figures in black stormed into the office, flashlights sweeping across the walls. Jen crawled under the desk and hit the silent alarm. Police sirens started wailing in the distance within 5 minutes. But by the time they arrived, the intruders were gone. Marissa's computers were smashed, cabinets ransacked, but they hadn't found the GoPro, because it wasn't there. It had already been moved. Meanwhile, Calvin was in the woods again, this time with Gregory and a duffel bag. They weren't hiding anymore. They were hunting. Calvin had seen the black SUV again earlier that day, parked 3 blocks from Marissa's office. He and Gregory decided to follow it. They drove slowly, headlights off, a few blocks behind. They tailed it through back roads and side streets until it pulled into a fenced compound on the south side of town. Private property, no signs. Calvin parked their car behind an abandoned barn and walked with Gregory to a ridge overlooking the compound. Binoculars confirmed it, 2 men guarding the entrance. One had an earpiece. "I recognize him," Gregory whispered. "He was at Daniel's funeral. Marie said he was a family friend." "Yeah," Calvin said. "Armed family friend." Gregory exhaled sharply. "So this is what she's been hiding. What do you say we rattle her cage back?" The next day, another headline went live on Marissa's site. "Video confirms mountain death was no accident. Full footage withheld pending police response." This time, she included a blurry still image of the push. Marie's hand clearly on Daniel's back. It was enough. Within hours, Marie called a press conference. She was calm, collected, and wore a dark dress with a ribbon pinned to her chest. "I'm being targeted by people who want to destroy my life," she said into the camera. "This so-called footage is a lie, fabricated to ruin my name. I lost my husband, and now they want to take everything else." Gregory watched the press conference from his car. Calvin sat next to him, arms crossed. "She's acting. She's stalling," Gregory said, "waiting for her guys to find us." Then something happened that neither of them expected. A bullet hit the windshield. Glass exploded. Gregory screamed and hit the gas. Calvin ducked as another shot rang out, slicing through the passenger mirror. They sped down the road, tires screaming, weaving through traffic. A black sedan was tailing them. "Hold steady," Calvin growled, pulling the Glock from his jacket. Gregory gritted his teeth and jerked the wheel. Calvin leaned out the window, aimed and fired twice. Pop, pop. The sedan swerved, clipped a mailbox, and slammed into a telephone pole. Smoke poured out from under the hood. Gregory didn't stop driving until they reached the outskirts of town. Heart pounding, Calvin turned to him. "We're in it now, no turning back." Gregory's jaw tightened. "We finish this, and we take her down." Before we continue, let us know in the comments where you are watching from today and what time you are currently watching this video. If you enjoy stories like this, make sure to like, share, and subscribe for more. Gregory slammed the brakes just outside a rundown gas station off Route 6. The tires screeched and left faint marks on the cracked pavement. Both men jumped out of the car, adrenaline still running wild after the chase and shootout. "We can't go back into town," Gregory said, his voice shaking slightly. "They'll be looking for us, the cops too." Gunfire in the middle of the street. Someone must have called it in. Calvin nodded, pulling his jacket tighter around him. "Then we hit them where it hurts. Their secrets." He reached into the glove compartment and pulled out an envelope, thick, with documents inside. Property records, bank transfers, old emails. Gregory raised an eyebrow. "Where'd you get that?" "I've been watching Marie longer than I admitted. When I found the GoPro, I started digging." Calvin glanced around the empty lot. "Turns out she's been buying up land, not under her name, under shell companies. Quiet, hidden, but the money leads straight to her." Gregory opened the envelope and flipped through the files. Each page added weight to the truth. "She's corrupt," Calvin said flatly, "and not just morally. She's laundering money through fake development projects. Daniel must have found out. That's why she killed him." Gregory clenched his fist. "Then this isn't just about her pushing my brother. It's everything. And if we release this, her whole house of cards falls apart." They drove north, away from Crestmont, toward a small cabin Gregory's friend owned near Lake Weiler. It was off-grid, no cameras, no signals, just woods, water, and quiet. For the next 2 days, they laid low. They studied every document, every note, every connection between Marie and the men who had attacked them. It was all there. A private security firm registered in another state. Payments made from a dummy account. Surveillance logs showing she had Calvin followed after the article dropped. It was no longer a guessing game. She was watching everything. On the third night, they called Marissa on a burner phone. "We have the proof," Gregory said. "More than the GoPro, financials, documents, ties to dirty land deals. You ready?" Marissa's voice was calm but firm. "Send me copies. I'll prep the release. But be careful. She's already issued a statement that you two are suspects in the shooting. They're painting you as radicals trying to ruin her campaign." Gregory cursed under his breath. She's flipping the story. She's smart, Calvin said, staring into the trees. But not untouchable. They made a plan. The next day, Marissa posted the first wave. Exposed, documents show candidate Marie Morton's ties to fraud, shell companies, and off-grid land laundering scheme. She didn't release everything, just enough to shake the walls. The town lit up, social media exploded. News vans parked outside Marie's campaign headquarters. Marie herself posted a video calling the leaks complete fabrications and blaming a bitter man and a deranged hiker with a criminal history for the chaos. Gregory laughed bitterly when he saw it. Calvin didn't laugh. We need to make this personal. That night, they drove back into Crestmont. Quietly, no lights, no phones. Their goal was Marie's lake house. Isolated, private, and if their hunch was right, used for her backdoor meetings. Calvin scouted ahead through the woods while Gregory waited in the car. When he returned, his face was tight. She's in there, alone, lights are on. She's expecting someone. Gregory pulled out a small body camera and clipped it to his chest. We go in, we confront her, we get a confession. Or we get shot, Calvin muttered. Then we shoot back. They approached the house from the side. Calvin had his Glock drawn. Gregory carried a small revolver tucked in the back of his waistband. They crept up the steps, boots soft on the wooden deck. Gregory knocked, a long pause. Then the door opened. Marie stood there. She didn't look surprised. Thought you'd come eventually, she said, her voice calm. Gregory stepped in. You pushed Daniel. You stole money. You sent men after us. Marie gave a thin smile. You're angry. I get it, but all you have is a video of a fall. An accident, and a bunch of files you probably don't understand. Calvin stepped forward. We understand enough to bury you. Her eyes flicked toward Calvin, and for the first time, something in her shifted, worry, maybe, or fear. Gregory held out a phone. We go public, full file dump, everything, unless you confess. Marie took a slow breath, then laughed. You think I'm gonna crack just because you're holding a few papers and a video? You know what this is? She pulled a handgun from under the table behind her. This is insurance. Gregory moved fast. He drew first, fired a warning shot into the wall. Don't, he shouted. Marie didn't flinch. She raised the gun, but Calvin was quicker. He stepped in and knocked it from her hand. The gun clattered to the floor. Marie's calm cracked. You ruined everything, she hissed. No, Gregory said, stepping closer. You did. The day you pushed my brother. Calvin hit record on his phone. You think they'll believe you? Marie barked. You're a grieving brother with a vendetta. He was unstable. Gregory cut her off. He was my best friend, my family, and you murdered him. Marie's eyes filled with tears, not sorrow, but rage. And then she said it. He was going to expose me. I warned him. I told him to let it go. But he wouldn't. He kept digging. I had no choice. Calvin stepped back, jaw tight. That's all we needed. He showed her the phone, still recording. Marie's mouth fell open. Gregory smiled for the first time in months. You're done, he said. But they didn't realize someone else had been listening. Outside, headlights flicked on in the woods. Another car, another man, watching, waiting. The headlights in the woods didn't move. They just stayed there, still, quiet, like eyes watching them from the dark. Calvin spotted them first through the large window behind Marie. We're not alone, he said. Gregory turned quickly and peeked through the side curtain. They followed us? I don't think they ever lost us, Calvin replied, lowering his voice. He grabbed the body cam from his chest and slipped it into his coat. We've got the confession. That's all that matters. Now we get out. Marie stood still in the living room, breathing hard. Her face had gone pale. Who is it? Gregory asked her. You call someone? She didn't answer, just stared at the headlights like she'd seen a ghost. But this wasn't anything supernatural. This was real, flesh and blood danger. The kind that showed up with guns and didn't care who got hurt. Then the headlights switched off. Darkness swallowed the forest again. Move, Calvin ordered, now. They rushed through the back door and sprinted around the house toward their car. The wind was sharp and the trees creaked above them, but neither man cared. Calvin's heart thudded against his chest. Gregory's breathing was shallow and fast. When they reached the car, Calvin yanked the door open and froze. The tires were slashed. Gregory cursed under his breath. They knew we'd come. "We'll take hers," Calvin said, already sprinting back around the house. Inside the driveway, Marie's black SUV waited, locked. Gregory smashed the driver's side window with the butt of his revolver. Glass shattered. The alarm screamed to life. "Come on," Calvin shouted. They both climbed in, cut the wires under the steering column, and by some miracle Calvin had learned in his rougher years, hot-wired the car in less than 30 seconds. The engine roared to life. That's when the bullets started flying. Pop! Gunfire came from the woods. The passenger mirror exploded. The hood dented from a hit. Gregory ducked, his head between his knees. Calvin threw the car into reverse, then spun it in a sharp U-turn and floored it down the gravel road. Behind them, shadows moved between the trees, at least 2 men, maybe 3, one of them had a rifle. A bullet punched through the rear window, shattering glass across the seats. "They're trying to stop us from getting that footage out," Gregory shouted over the engine. "They're too late," Calvin yelled back. "Marissa already has half of it, and the rest's going to the cops." They didn't stop until they reached the state highway. Only then did they pull over in a truck stop parking lot and check the damage. Calvin's arm was bleeding from a graze nothing deep. Gregory's hands were shaking as he lit a cigarette. "You okay?" Calvin asked. Gregory gave a stiff nod. "I'm fine, you?" "I'll live." Calvin leaned against the hood. "But this is getting worse." "They won't stop now," Gregory said. "Not after what she confessed. Then we go straight to the state police. No more games, no more articles. Just the law." Gregory looked at him. "You think we can trust them?" "We'll find out." 2 hours later, they were at the State Police Bureau in Hammond. They walked into the lobby just after 2 a.m. The lights were low, but 2 officers were on duty. Calvin explained everything briefly, calmly, clearly. He showed the GoPro footage, then the financial files, then the recording of Marie's confession. The officers' expressions shifted slowly from bored to serious. "Wait here," one of them said, and disappeared behind a secured door. 15 minutes later, a detective walked in. Name tag, LTR Mallory, tall, older, gray stubble on his jaw, with tired eyes like he'd seen everything a man could see. He listened to the entire story, start to finish, without interrupting. When Calvin finished, Mallory scratched his chin and said, "That's a hell of a mess." "She tried to kill us," Gregory said. "We've got the wounds to prove it." "You have any idea who those men were?" Calvin nodded. "Private security. Connected to a shell company. She's paying them to clean things up." Mallory stood up. "You've brought us something explosive. This doesn't stay small. I'll push it to the AG's office by morning. You two stay in protective custody until then." Gregory let out a sigh of relief. For the first time in months, he felt like justice might actually happen. But Calvin wasn't convinced. Something in the detective's voice made him uneasy. Maybe it was the way he had said, "This doesn't stay small." Or maybe it was how he didn't write anything down. They were given a safe house on the edge of town. A small apartment above a closed bakery, 2 officers stationed outside. It was quiet, too quiet. At 3:47 a.m., Gregory couldn't sleep. He stood near the window, staring out into the night. Below, the cruiser headlights flickered briefly. Someone turned the engine on, then off, then on again. Gregory narrowed his eyes. "Calvin," he called out. "Get up." Calvin groaned and rubbed his head. "What is it?" "I don't trust this place." A second later, they both heard it, a single gunshot from below. Gregory yanked open the window. One officer was down, the other was gone. They moved fast, out the back door, down the fire escape, and into the alley behind the bakery. Calvin clutched the duffel bag with the remaining copies of the files. Gregory had the Glock now, safety off. "Where do we go?" Gregory asked. "We find Marissa now." At 5:10 a.m., they broke into Marissa's office, only to find it trashed again. This time worse than before. Papers burned, chairs broken, a computer smashed. And in the corner, tied to a chair, bruised and gagged, was Jen, Marissa's assistant. They untied her. She was crying, trembling, whispering over and over. "They took her. They took Marissa." Gregory's stomach sank. "Where?" Jen shook her head. "I don't know. They just said she talked too much." Calvin gritted his teeth. This wasn't just about Marie anymore. This was war. Before we continue, let us know in the comments where you are watching from today, and what time you are currently watching this video. If you enjoy stories like this, make sure to like, share, and subscribe for more. Calvin poured water into a mug with shaking hands. Jen was curled up on the old leather couch in Marissa's wrecked office, wrapped in a blanket. Gregory stood by the window, gun in hand, eyes scanning the dark street outside. The silence felt heavier now. Marissa was missing. I told them I didn't know anything, Jen said softly. But they didn't care. One of them kept saying she should have stayed out of it. The other just laughed. They didn't say where they were taking her, Gregory asked. She shook her head. They had masks on. One of them was tall with a scar on his neck. That's all I remember. Calvin and Gregory looked at each other. Scar? It was the same man Calvin had seen at the compound in the woods, the one outside Marie's lake house. He wasn't just a hired gun. He was the one giving orders. We have to find her, Calvin said. And fast, Gregory paced. We don't even know where to start. They could be anywhere. No, Calvin said, eyes narrowing. They'll go somewhere quiet. Somewhere hidden. We've seen that pattern. You mean the compound in the woods? Calvin nodded. That's our best bet. Gregory grabbed the keys to Marie's black SUV. Then let's finish this. It took them an hour to reach the outskirts of the forest where the compound sat. They left the car behind and hiked the last stretch through thick brush, staying low. The sun hadn't risen yet, and the forest was dark and cold. When they reached the ridge, Calvin raised the binoculars. There it was, the same cluster of buildings, the same perimeter fence. Except now, a light was on in one of the smaller sheds. A shadow moved across the window. She's in there, Calvin said. How do we get in? Gregory asked. We don't knock, Calvin muttered, checking his weapon. We crash the gate. They circled the compound and found a weak spot in the fence, a place where the wire had been peeled back and covered with brush. Gregory pulled it open and slipped through, followed by Calvin. They moved like shadows, sticking to the walls and low structures. The gravel under their boots crunched faintly with every step. Suddenly a voice. Hey, who's out there? Flashlights swept the dark. Gregory dropped to the ground behind a parked truck. Calvin ducked under a staircase. Footsteps approached, slow, careful. Gregory gripped his gun, eyes locked on the approaching beam of light. When the guard rounded the corner, Gregory didn't hesitate. Thump! He swung a wrench from his jacket, knocking the man out cold. Calvin signaled from across the yard now. They rushed to the shed, found the door locked from the outside with a heavy bolt. Gregory yanked it open. Inside, sitting on the ground with duct tape across her mouth and hands bound, was Marissa. Her eyes widened the moment she saw them. Calvin cut her loose. Are you okay? He asked. Marissa nodded, rubbing her wrists. They were going to kill me. Said they were just waiting for the green light. Who's running this? Gregory asked. They said her name, Marissa said. Marie. She's calling the shots from her house in the hills. She's got 3 men guarding her. One of them, the guy with the scar, said they'd disappear me by morning. Gregory's jaw tightened. We're not giving them the chance. We have to leave, Calvin said. But the moment they stepped out of the shed, gunshots. A burst of bullets hit the dirt at their feet. Down! They dropped and crawled behind a stack of crates. Voices shouted. Footsteps pounded the ground. They know we're here, Marissa screamed. Calvin returned fire, aiming low to hit their legs. One of the guards screamed and fell, his rifle skidding across the dirt. Gregory popped up and fired 2 quick shots. One hit the fence, the other hit a spotlight above, cutting their visibility. They ran. Calvin pulled Marissa by the arm, zigzagging through the shadows. Gregory covered them from the rear, firing off quick bursts to keep the attackers back. They made it through the hole in the fence, just as another round of gunfire tore through the trees. Branches snapped, bark exploded. Gregory ducked and twisted his ankle, but kept moving. They didn't stop until they reached the SUV. Calvin threw the door open. Go! Go! Everyone piled in. Gregory hit the gas, tires spitting gravel as they tore down the forest road. Shots echoed behind them, but none hit. After 2 long minutes of silence, only the sound of the engine remained. Marissa was shaking. They're not going to stop. Calvin looked back. Then we don't stop either. We finish it tonight. By sunrise, they reached a small town 20 miles south. Marissa made contact with someone at a national news outlet. They agreed to meet in person and verify the story. Gregory sat in the back seat with the duffel bag in his lap. "We're giving them everything?" Calvin nodded. "All of it, the video, the files, the confession, every name, every payment, every fake contract. They'll come for us again. Let them." At 10:30 a.m., they met the news team in a small parking lot near a rural airport. Calvin handed over a USB drive and a backup SD card. The journalist, a woman in her early 30s with sharp eyes and a bulletproof vest under her coat, nodded. "We'll publish by noon. You'll want to lay low." Calvin looked her in the eye. "Make it loud. Make sure everyone hears it." But Marie had one last card to play. At 12:17 p.m., as the story was going live, Calvin received a text from an unknown number. "You still don't know the full truth. Meet me. Come alone." Attached was a live photo, Daniel's old wedding ring, sitting on a table, in a room Calvin didn't recognize. Gregory looked at him. "What is it?" Calvin stared at the phone. "She wants to talk." The text was clear, no threats. No insults, just the ring and a location, 145 Croft Lane. 4 p.m., come alone. It was just over an hour until then. Calvin stared at the message like it might vanish. His throat was dry. He handed the phone to Gregory. "It's a trap," Gregory said instantly. "She's trying to get the evidence back." Calvin shook his head. "She already knows it's gone public. This isn't about silencing me anymore." "Then what is it?" "I don't know, but I have to find out." Gregory leaned forward, voice tight. "No, I'm not letting you walk into that alone. You have to. If she thinks you're coming too, she won't talk." Calvin looked out the window. "Let me finish what Daniel started." There was a pause, then Gregory nodded slowly. "You call me the second you're out." "I will." 3:55 p.m. Calvin pulled up to a small abandoned warehouse on the edge of town. It was rusted and silent, with broken windows and weeds pushing up through the cracks in the pavement. There were no cars nearby. No sound. He stepped inside with his Glock tucked at his side, just in case. The air smelled like dust and oil. In the middle of the room, under a hanging light bulb, sat a wooden table. On it, Daniel's wedding ring. Marie stood next to it. She looked different, pale, tired. Her once perfect hair was pulled back, and there were faint bruises under her eyes, like she hadn't slept in days. Calvin didn't speak first. "She did. I figured you'd come," she said softly. "Why me?" he asked. "Why not just run?" Marie gave a faint smile. "Run where? My name is everywhere now. They tore me apart online." "You did that." "I didn't kill your husband." She flinched. Her eyes shifted. "I didn't mean to," she whispered. "Not like that." "You pushed him." Marie turned away. "He said he'd turn me in." "He found the shell companies. The money. Everything. He confronted me that morning on the trail when Ella wasn't listening." Calvin stepped closer. "So you killed him." "I panicked," she shouted. "We argued. He said he was going to the police. He called me a liar. Said I was dragging the family into something dark." "You shoved him." Marie looked up at the ceiling. "He was standing close to the edge. I just put my hand out. I didn't think he'd fall. I thought he'd catch himself. He was strong. But he just went over." Calvin stared at her in silence. She looked broken. "I didn't even scream right away. I just stood there." Then Elite said he slipped. "I had to, for Ella. For the campaign. Everything would have ended. You killed a man, a father, a brother." Marie stepped back, voice shaking. "You don't understand what it's like to feel your whole life collapse in 1 second. Calvin didn't reply. His voice was cold now. "You made your choices." "You're right," she said, her shoulders sagging. "That's why I called you here." He stiffened. "Why?" She reached under the table. Calvin's hand moved to his gun fast, but she didn't pull a weapon. She pulled a flash drive and tossed it onto the table. "What's this?" "Insurance," she said. "All of it emails, proof, names. You publish this and I'm done. No lawyer can save me." Calvin didn't move. "You want a full confession?" she said, eyes wet. "I killed Daniel. I stole money. I hired men to cover my tracks. I ruined people's lives. You win. You could have said all this 8 months ago. I know. You only came clean because the walls caved in." She gave a sad smile. "Even criminals reach a point where they can't breathe anymore." Then she walked toward him slowly. "Are you going to shoot me?" "No." Marie stopped in front of him and whispered, "Then take this and go." Calvin left the warehouse with the flash drive and Daniel's ring. He didn't look back. At the car, he called Gregory. She confessed alive, yeah. You believe her? I saw it in her eyes. 1 week later, Marie Morton was arrested in public view outside a hotel in Crestmont. The footage made national news. The murder confession, the corruption, the hired guns, all of it came out. She was charged with first-degree murder, conspiracy, fraud, and obstruction of justice. Daniel's name was cleared. His death was no longer an accident, it was truth. Gregory stood beside Calvin during the press conference. Marissa was back, reporting again, her face bruised but her voice strong. Ella, Daniel's daughter, stayed away from the cameras. She had been taken in by Daniel's sister and refused to speak to Marie again. 1 month later, Calvin stood at the edge of Blue Haven Ridge, right where Daniel had fallen. He held the wedding ring in his palm. The valley was quiet. He closed his eyes, then dropped the ring gently into the river far below. It was time to let go. If you like this story, make sure to like, share, and subscribe. Also, in order to strengthen our community, let us know in the comments where you are watching from and what time you are currently watching this video.